During the transitional ministry, the congregation worked faithfully to develop a congregational covenant, to respond to the question of how will we be together? By design, covenant is a theological commitment. It is a practical response to a question of ultimate concern. Again, how do we want to be together? In a faith tradition that refuses a creedal posture requirement of belief, a tradition that privileges pluralism, diversity, and interdependence over a single path to the truth, we need something to hold us in community, something to hold us in connection, a shared understanding of, you guessed it, how do we want to be together? If you are new to Unitarian Universalism, you might notice that the content of our covenant does not come from the outside, does not come from on high. It's not a document or an invitation to be in relationship with a higher authority. It's derived from within the community. It's rooted in our Unitarian Universalist values and the particular commitments of this congregation. The congregational covenant emerges from the people and serves the people. This practice is reflective of our commitment to democracy, to the power of people to shape and lead their communities. Reverend Rebecca Ann Parker, in her essay, Love is a Circle in Time, reminds us that, quote, love must live in the present, here and now. In covenant with one another, we can practice the ways of love. Covenant liberates us to love more deeply, more freely, and with more confidence. I imagine that when the Congregational Covenant Committee was convened and charged with the important work of leading the process of creating a congregational covenant, the idea that this congregational covenant would provide guidance, inspiration, and centering during the emergence of a new age of authoritarianism in the United States had not quite settled in as a reality. And here we are. Today we realize that covenant is exactly what we need. About a year ago, I shared a message that insisted that we, Unitarian Universalists and members and friends of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Durango, are architects of love in a hurting, broken world, and that we are committed to building the beloved community right here, right now. We are committed to the practice of love. The architecture of our community of love, care, justice, and connection is our covenant. It is all the actions we each take to live in alignment with our deepest values, with one another, among one another, with vulnerability, risk, and the work of repair when needed. We will make mistakes, and we will return again and again to the source, our covenant, for guidance, hope, and renewal of our promises. Over the next few months, we will continue to explore the role of covenant in the life of our congregation, noticing how it infuses our community with resiliency as we face the challenges of our day, appreciating how it nudges us towards growth as we practice deep listening direct and respectful communication, and dismantling the barriers to full inclusion. Around our campus, you'll find copies of our congregational covenant. It looks like this. You'll find it throughout our spaces, here in our sanctuary, in Bowman Hall, in Columbine House, in our conference room, on paper, on the website. And the idea is to familiarize ourselves with the covenant, to hear the invitation to bring our covenant to life as we create community together, nurturing that resilience and strength and mutual care that will sustain us through the days ahead. The invitation is to engage the covenant as a source of collective wisdom and allow it to bring out the very best of who we are. Allow it to draw us closer to each other so we might anchor into our collective power and resist the threats of tyranny that would separate us from one another and from our neighbors, from our values and our mission. Practicing covenant is sacred generative resistance. It says yes to life, to love, in the presence of injustice. Today, Julie Jordan will give us a peek of behind the scenes insight into the power and importance of covenant groups, which serve as a microcosm of our larger community. They are small groups that gather monthly to explore the big questions of our faith. They are interested in the ultimate concern. They provide a space to practice vulnerability and community care with open hearts, tenderness, grace, and compassion. And after you hear Julie's reflection, I hope you'll be inspired to join a covenant group as a source of hope and resiliency and a place to build the beloved community. Finally, I was reflecting on these words from Timothy Snyder yesterday. He shares 3 rules for effective resistance. He writes, "It's okay to take a little step, so long as it's something you know something about, something you do with other people. Do regularly, and it makes you a little bit uncomfortable. If it meets those criteria, then you're helping democracy." Living into and practicing our congregational covenant is the spiritual ground of our resistance and the infrastructure for our future. The small steps that help democracy, choosing to be the beloved community right here, right now, with each act of loving kindness we find in our covenant. When we do this, we are refusing despair and choosing hope. Our congregational covenant returns us repeatedly to the core of who we are, people of faith, action, love, and justice, people that are dedicated to a future flourishing for all people and the earth. May it be so.
Ta-da. Good morning. My name is Julie Jordan. My pronouns are she, her. I've been a Unitarian for over 50 years, which is impossible because I haven't aged that much. I've been a member here for about 10 years, and I have been involved with covenant groups since they began. I've been a participant, a facilitator, and an organizer. A few years ago, UUFD got together a task force to kind of define covenant groups. And this is our first definition. Covenant groups at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Durango are intentional, lay-led, small ministry groups that deepen and expand the ministry of the congregation. In the beginning, when covenant groups were just first started, there was a worry that they might form cliques. This really hasn't happened. In the beginning, they wanted you to limit a covenant group to 2 years. This requirement has been dropped. There's no real evidence of cliques. I personally think that's because the things that are discussed in covenant groups are not something you chat with somebody you don't know very well, in Bowman Hall over coffee. But anyway, I would defy anyone to identify the covenant groups here. Time has shown that for older people, and none of that applies to us, covenant groups have been a real source of connection and comfort. This was especially true during COVID. In my own experience during a difficult time in my life, my only connection with the church that I could manage was my covenant group. But in the end, that made it easy to come back, as it were. Covenant groups are not friends groups. One of the goals of covenant groups is to accept and value people who think differently from you. And this can be challenging. In my first group, just right at the beginning, there was a man who thought very differently from me. And I thought, oh, Lord, here we go. But you know what? Over time, I learned to value him in a way that I never would have had I not gotten to know him in a deeper way. And in the covenant group, when you share your thoughts, you get to know people in a totally different way than you do, like at coffee hour. Confidentiality is an absolute requirement for covenant groups, for each person to feel safe sharing their deepest feelings and thoughts. Nothing shared in covenant groups should ever be shared outside covenant group. It's not a social group. It's a serious commitment to one another, to set aside each month that time to gather. There are always some absences, of course, and some groups take the summer off, but you don't schedule lunch with a friend at the time that your covenant group would be meeting. Covenant groups practice deep listening, and that is listening without interrupting, which can be very challenging for some of us who like to talk. There are no questions during check-in or the first and even the second round of talks. Maybe after that, some covenant groups open it up. And this is because when a person is speaking and you ask them a question, you redirect what they are going to say in a way that you want to hear, as opposed to letting them continue on with what they want to say. So letting people talk without interrupting is a gift that shows your respect for them. And this is also a reason covenant groups are not called discussion groups, because you don't have crosstalk and discussing. Covenant groups choose the topic that they want to discuss each time they meet. Some use the heart-to-heart books, some use the Soul Matters curriculum, which we use here, and some use other sources. There are many topics and resources on the UUA website under small group ministry. Covenant groups have structure for each gathering, and this is decided by the members. There's check-in, lighting the chalice, introducing the topic, and then sharing. Some groups like to have a timer, some are more free-flowing. And also, a member might decide they really don't want to talk about whatever that topic is and they choose to be silent. Within the group, each member should feel valued and supported wherever it is they are in their journey. While structure is important to make sure that everyone is heard, there are times when someone is having a crisis. The group may decide to abandon the topic and support the member who needs help. It doesn't happen often, but it can happen. Groups should not value their schedule over their members' needs. While not giving advice unless specifically asked, everyone can listen and validate the member who is in crisis. At times, our group has been known to get up and go hug someone who's been having a hard time. So you never, ever value your structure over your people. While teams and committees are ways that you give to the church, covenant groups are ways that we give to one another. Many times in a covenant group that I've been in, someone has said it was all they could do to get there. You know, they had a hard day at work, the kids were driving them crazy, they were just so tired. But 201, they always said, I'm so glad I came. I feel so much better after coming and being with this group. And that they felt renewed and ready to go about life again. If you think a covenant group is for you, you can sign up with either me or Bonnie Miller. We'll have pads. And mark your calendars because there's an organizational meeting on February 7th at 1 p.m. And we hope to get at least 2, and if more of you sign up, more, groups up and running at that time. And I will close with the mission statement for covenant groups that the task force developed several years ago. Covenant groups offer the gifts of spiritual and emotional connection. We listen to each other. We listen to our lives. We listen to our deepest selves. These sacred practices of listening reveal a more intentional and authentic life. In the process of deep listening and sharing, participants learn to practice a meaningful and distinctive way of being together and of developing relational skills. So, come see me or Bonnie.